Hey everyone, it's Wednesday, June 11th, 2025, and you're watching DeProgram with John Kiriakou and me, Ted Rall. Thanks so much for joining us. Little business housekeeping. Please make sure you support, like, all that stuff. So today we're going to be talking about the ICE protests first. Then we're going to get into the latest situation in Iran, which is heating up fast. And 1 million Americans have left the United States in the last 4 years. We're seeing record numbers of net emigration. What does that mean? So let's just lurch right into it. Right here in New York City, we had a major protest with over 2,000 demonstrators protesting ICE yesterday. More to come Saturday. We're expecting a lot more because people will be off work. Protests are spreading to cities across the country, Chicago, Austin, Texas, and you pretty much name it. That's all going to be competing on Saturday with the big Army parade celebrating Trump's birthday and the 250th birthday of the U.S. Army this coming Saturday with the military parade in Washington. I don't know. It's like the hits keep on coming, John.
Ted, the tanks are literally in the streets today in Washington. They're just parked. They're just sitting there unmanned, blocking the streets. I had to drive up to Capitol Hill yesterday, and I had to go the long way around by getting off of Constitution Avenue, if you know Washington, going all the way down to Independence, then coming around because Pennsylvania's closed, Constitution's closed, Capitol Hill shut down. There are tanks and armored personnel vehicles everywhere getting ready to participate in this stupid parade. They've built bleachers on Constitution Avenue and more bleachers in front of the Lincoln Memorial. It's just a friggin' wreck. It's going to tear up the streets and be a mess. And it's going to cost millions of dollars unnecessarily. And I want to say something too, Ted. One of our viewers texted me and asked if it was true that that Michelle has fled to Canada. And the answer is no. He said that people were speculating about it seriously. And I said, no, she got a different job. You know, we all have expenses and God knows we're not making any money doing this.
No, that's true.
But it's fun. And so Michelle she just couldn't afford to keep it up. So she has not fled to Canada. She's here in DC working, and we're wishing her the best.
Yeah. Thank you. Well, thank you for the query. And yeah, I mean, we love Michelle, and we're doing it without her, but it wasn't like we kicked her out or anything like that.
No. We love Michelle, and we want her back.
She voluntarily took off. So Michelle, if you're listening or watching, we miss you. So anyway, all right. So let me turn off that particular. Oh my God, devices everywhere. So, you know, I mean, I've been studying the polls, John, about the reaction to the immigration crackdown, and it is turning out to be pretty much what we thought, right? Which is yes. Most Americans we're common sense people mostly, and basically the common sense is entering a country illegally is illegal. And you can be caught and punished and deported anywhere on earth if you do that. And that's how most people feel about it. But how you do things matters. The crackdown, you know, I was watching Fox just before we went live, and they're saying, why are the protesters so mad? All we're doing is enforcing the law. Well, you are enforcing the law, that's true. But how you enforce the law, you know, there's a lot of ways to do that. And dragging people away from their screaming children, not giving them any notice whatsoever. And I guess the real elephant in the room is, you know, for decades, Democrats and Republicans left the border wide open. For the last 4 years, we even gave people an app to download and say, make your appointment at the border, cross the border, and we'll let you in. And these people did exactly what we wanted them to do. They came and worked for next to nothing. They helped drive down American wages. That's what Republicans wanted. And the Democrats thought that their kids were going to vote for them. That didn't work out. But the Democrats wanted them to come in. Everybody left the border open. these people came here seeking better lives, making more money, and then suddenly we turn on them. What are you doing here, you maniac, you invader, you terrorist? I'm just doing what you told me to do. And so I think there's sympathy for the brutality and the cruelty with which these raids are being carried out.
Yes. My best friend from high school is a very long time resident of Los Angeles, as is my brother, as is my best friend from college. And they're all texting me, like over the last couple of days, 50, 60, 70 times, saying that what we're seeing on the news is actually not as grievous as it seems. It's based almost exclusively in the very center of the city of Los Angeles. When we see on CNN that the 101 is closed, my brother lives 2 blocks off the 101, and I almost panicked when I read it. And he said, no, it's only closed in downtown LA. It's everything's normal everywhere else. All this footage that we're seeing is from downtown LA. But with that said, when you send 2,000 National Guard troops, you're going to raise the temperature on this thing. When you send 700 active duty Marines, who, let's face it, are 18, 19, 20 years old, and are not trained in law enforcement, are certainly not trained in peacekeeping. They're trained specifically to kill people. And then you have protesters throwing rocks and Molotov cocktails facing these kids in battle fatigues. It's a recipe for disaster. And the blame has to fall, the buck has to stop somewhere. And that's got to be at the very top. But with that having been said, Donald Trump wants somebody to miscalculate. Donald Trump wants the violence to increase so that he has the ability to say, I told you so, and make it even worse. And then, I read in Politico today, I wanted to reach out and smack the writer. I read in Politico today that, Newsom is saying, well, if I handle this right, why, this can be a blueprint for how we take on the Republicans. It's like, you moron. Is that how you see this crisis?
Yeah.
How to get yourself at the top of the list for Democrats? Oh, it just made me infuriated.
It is maddening. And, I'm having a flashback here, John. I mean, I was a little kid when Richard Nixon was president. And, his whole framing of the unrest in the streets over mostly the Vietnam War, but also a variety of other issues, racial injustice, and so on. Came down to, I, Richard Nixon, support the silent majority. I'm going to restore law and orders to the streets of the cities. I'm going to put these dirty hippies in their place. And the implication was, if we have to shoot a few sometimes to clean up the streets, so be it. Now, that last part's a little unfair to Richard Nixon, because he really, I think that's not really what he wanted, but that was sort of the tone that he was messaging. People like Governor Ronald Reagan of California, Governor James Rhodes of Ohio, who ordered the Kent State shootings, they really did want to shoot a few people to send a message. To
teach a lesson, yes.
Teach a lesson, right, set a precedent. And that's what happened in I think that's what, I think Donald Trump is, he's trying to out Nixon here, right? He's trying to have, BDE as the acronym goes. This is a hyper testosterone, kind of approach. And it is going to lead to, some beautiful young person or 2 or 3 is going to be killed. When this keeps up, it's inevitable. And I sympathize actually with the future shooters, because they've been put in an impossible situation. Like you said, they're not trained. They're going to be miserable. They're literally, weighed down with combat gear and armor, body armor, in a street where it can be 85 degrees. People are throwing things at them, insulting them. And if one of their comrades seems to be in danger, they're trained to defend them and
exactly
threat. That's what they're supposed to do. So it's a terrible situation, and it's grossly reckless and irresponsible. And God help Donald Trump and the Republicans, because the thing about the American people is it's all good fun until something like that happens. And when that loop starts running, like the young lady who was killed in Iran a few years back, right?
Right.
When that loop starts running over and over and over, he's going to watch his polls, the thing he cares the most about, just circle the drain.
Ted, how about this for a breaking news alert from the Los Angeles Times that I received 2 minutes ago? The headline is Federal Agents Crash into Vehicle, Take Man into Custody in Dramatic Boyle Heights Arrest. And it says federal agents rammed and trapped a white sedan in Boyle Heights before extracting a driver from the vehicle, leaving behind a screaming woman and child. That's exactly the kind of headline the administration wants in this fight. It wants to show that it's tough and is handling this thing in a tough way.
I mean, the thing is, the optics of it are so weird. Again, on Fox, they were saying, well, Trump secured the border. Actually, toward the end of his run, Joe Biden secured the border again, right? He saw his polls, and so I guess it was April or May, he decided to shut down the border last year. And the policy hasn't really changed since then. Trump just inherited that. He hasn't really done anything except he's sending goons into neighborhoods to attack innocent people. It's disgusting.
It is. It's awful. And it's going to get worse. You know, we're starting to see fires and cars being overturned and lots of arrests. Just on the very first night, there were 45 arrests. There were something like 65 arrests yesterday. And again, that's the point. The point on the side of the White House is to make this look as violent as possible, to give them then the green light to crack down. And on the other side, it's to provoke violence, provoke the National Guard and the Marines and the police into violence, so it looks like this unconstitutional, illegal crackdown is taking place. Now, there aren't going to be any winners in this, I'm afraid.
Some people, and I don't, as you know, I'm not a conspiratorial person, but some people have been floating around the prospect that this is all part of some sort of master plan to declare martial law, declare state of emergency, declare martial law, and then suspend civil liberties, suspend habeas corpus, and sort of basically put democracy into the icebox. And when I read these theories, there's not really anything to support it right now. But when I read these people talking this way, I keep thinking Donald Trump knows that as soon as his get out of jail free card from criminal prosecution goes away on January 20th, 2029. Yeah. So he must is that possible, or is that just ridiculous?
You know what? I think anything's possible at this point. But there was another important point that you kind of alluded to, and I want to ask you about it. I'm not a lawyer. I know that you're not a lawyer.
No.
But what about the Posse Comitatus Act? Doesn't that forbid the deployment of Marines anywhere in the United States?
It does. I mean, it's very, very clear. It's it's a nearly 200-year-old law passed after the Civil War. It was meant to exactly oppose this. I mean, to my knowledge, this has not happened, right? I mean, I don't know that is the workaround that these Marines are technically under National Guard command. That might be the workaround. I mean, obviously the thing is, as you know, if something's illegal, it doesn't really matter until someone goes to court and gets a judge to rule that it's illegal, and then it works its way through the appellate process until finally whatever the highest court decides to deal with rules on it. So, it can be as illegal as the day is long, but it's, it still happens. It seems, I mean, Trump could invoke the Insurrection Act. I thought this was interesting. He could do that. It would be legal. He'd have to declare that this is either an insurrection or a rebellion or an invasion. Now, I know right-wingers say this is an invasion. This is not an invasion. Invasion is the German army.
It's not. And they call it that all the time.
December 1st, 1939. That's an invasion. It's like, this is not you could, I guess, argue that it's an insurrection, but that would be hard when you have the governor of the state and the mayor of the city claiming and arguing that the local authorities have everything well in hand. And the police chief also says that they have everything well in hand. And it's credible that they have everything well in hand. So I don't see, what the league. So it's interesting because Trump was asked about this and he's like, well, it's not quite an insurrection. So there's something holding him back from invoking the Insurrection Act. I'm wondering if that's the constitutional purists within the MAGA movement, of whom there are many, right? Because they came out of the Tea Party, and these are people who carry little pocket constitutions around, and they know what their rights are, and they're going to be afraid to see that, because that act historically was always threatened against people like them.
I have to add a little completely unrelated tidbit, because you just reminded me of something. You said Tea Party. There was a piece in thehill.com today saying that Joe Walsh, the former Tea Party congressman from Texas, announced today that he is considering running against Lindsey Graham for the Senate. Okay, that's not interesting. What was interesting was he decided to change party affiliations a couple days ago to Democrat, and he's going to run against Lindsey Graham as a Democrat. He's moving to South Carolina like this week just so he could run against Lindsey Graham. And when asked why he wants to run against Lindsey Graham, he said, and I quote, because Lindsey Graham is a piece of shit.
Well,
our politics have gone crazy.
That's awesome. I mean, he's right about Lindsey Graham. That's funny. I mean, I guess it's like, it's not that unheard of. I mean, it's reminds me of Rudy Giuliani and Michael Bloomberg running as Republicans for mayor because the New York Democratic machine was so locked up. It was the only way they could get in, even though neither of them were really Republicans. So then it's weird because Bloomberg ended up running briefly as a Republican presidential candidate. Might have been the worst presidential candidate in my lifetime.
He ran as a Democrat.
Oh, is that? That's right.
He ran as and spent more money than anybody. It was a crazy amounts of money for the numbers of votes that he got.
And it's weird too because he's such a brilliant business person and such an atrocious candidate.
Yeah, just a terrible, terrible candidate.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then you remember in 2016, once he dropped out of the race, he said that he would continue to spend insane amounts of money just to help Joe Biden win.
Yep, that's right. Yeah, he's so anti-Trump, so never Trump. John, before we move on, what's going to happen next? I mean, right now these protests are moving to other cities. Obviously, for the administration, it's a little bit like playing militaristic whack-a-mole. Can they send troops to every city, or will they just pick and choose? How much will this escalate before it devolves into even more serious violence? Or will the movement, like so many others in American history, simply just peter out the way that, say, the actual riots in LA in 1992 did?
Yeah, I think this will peter out. First of all, Donald Trump has virtually unlimited firepower in 50 different National Guards, right? Or 51, I suppose, technically. And he is perfectly happy to call in as many National Guard troops as he wants. There's nobody to stop him, not legally anyway. And looking back, Ted, at things like what was it in Seattle? It was before Occupy Wall Street. It was the anti-WTO, was it?
Yeah, the 1999 Battle of Seattle.
Yeah, that's right, the Battle of Seattle, and the protests in New York and Washington, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Freedom Square, all those things, they just kind of went away. And as much as I hate to say it, I think that's probably what we're going to look at here. If Black Lives Matter petered out as quickly as it did, I don't think this has a chance.
And Black Lives Matter, had a tactical advantage of taking place during the pandemic. I remember I was parking my car here in New York when there was a BLM protest just walking by, and I struck up a conversation with an attendee, and he goes, I wouldn't be here, but there's no Yankees game today.
See,
there was nothing else to do. No work, no sporting events, no distractions. It was the only game in town.
You know what? I participated in two. One in Boston, because I happened to be in New Hampshire visiting my sister. It was gigantic, and it was completely and totally peaceful. And then a much, much smaller one in Manchester, New Hampshire, right where my sister lives. And it was hostile and slightly dangerous. It's the only time in my life anybody ever called me an N-word lover. It was a guy in a big pickup truck with a Trump flag, and he rolled down the window and shouted it at us. Yeah. What are you going to do?
I've always said that I've actually never, it shows my white experience. I've never once heard the N-word used, in its traditional way at someone.
Yeah. You should go to Pennsylvania. Oh, you should go to Pennsylvania. When James Carville said that Pennsylvania was Pittsburgh and Philadelphia with Alabama in the middle, he was right.
Pennsyltucky.
That's what we used to call it. Yeah.
All right. Well, so we'll see what happens. We're going to continue to follow this, and the next show will be Saturday. I have a feeling we'll know a lot more. It'll be Saturday at 12 noon Eastern time. So watch that. Okay. So let's keep this going. So. The Iranians rejected the latest U.S. offer at the nuclear talks. They're trolling Israel, which really made me laugh. They said, we need the Israelis to denuclearize. Hear, hear.
Yeah. And the Iranians claim that one of their spies in Israel has sent them thousands of pages of IAEA documents, International Atomic Energy Agency documents. At first, I poo-pooed the idea, and I actually had an argument with a friend of mine saying, come on, this is just too good to be true. It turns out they look to be legit documents, and the IAEA has come out and said that, these documents were stolen. So the Iranians sort of have a leg up right now, saying, wait a minute, we're trying to abide by IAEA regulations. We've offered up our facilities to IAEA inspectors, and the Israelis have a nuclear program, quite a robust one. By some estimates, they have 200 nuclear warheads, and they won't even admit that they have a program. So who's the bad guy here? It's a good question.
It's a very good question. So are these talks really falling apart, or?
Well, that's a good question. The talks as of 2 days ago reached an impasse, and it's just as we thought it was going to be, Ted. It's about the level of uranium enrichment that the Iranians would be allowed to maintain. Now, they had been enriching uranium at 35% for a very long time. When Donald Trump pulled out of the JCPOA, they upped it to 67%. Mm-hmm. 95% is weapons quality enrichment. Mm-hmm. It's actually quite easy to go from 67 to 95. It's very difficult to go from 35 to 95. Mm. Okay, that's it. The U.S. position has changed repeatedly over the course of these negotiations.
The Iranians have been complaining about that.
And they've been complaining for legitimate reasons. So at first we said, no, they can't enrich any uranium at all. That's a non-starter. Then we said, okay, they can enrich uranium at 35. Then we said, all right, they can enrich the uranium at 67, but then they have to leave the uranium in the United Arab Emirates. And they said, no, we're not going to do that. We'll enrich the uranium to 67 and we'll allow IAEA inspections, but it's going to stay in Iran because we want to use it for nuclear power and for experimentation. And then Trump said, no, you have to, you can go up to 67%, but then it has to be kept somewhere in the GCC countries. I nominate Oman. And Oman is like, we don't want the Iranian uranium. Right. Nobody ever even asked the Omanis if they wanted the Iranian uranium. And so then Trump's latest position was, okay, no enrichment at all. And the Iranians are like, okay, now you want to fight. Well, Trump went on a podcast today hosted by the New York Post. Now, you and I both read the New York Post. It's a right-wing rag, and we read it because it's fun. Right?
It's also essential.
It is essential because it really does speak for the administration.
Yeah.
And so he said on this podcast this morning, not only that the talks are at an impasse and are probably going to fail. It's the first time he has said that. Mm-hmm. But he said that yesterday, the Defense Department gave him the latest updated plans to attack Iran. And he said, if we attack Iran, and we don't want to, but if we do, the attack would be a massive one. The Iranians now responded by threatening literally every American base in Iraq. And we've got like 24 of them. They're little teeny tiny bases, but we have bases all over Iraq. That has caused a drawdown where we're evacuating the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. Mm-hmm. And we've instituted a voluntary drawdown for the U.S. embassies in Kuwait and Bahrain. Now, I will say, I served both in Kuwait and Bahrain. I went through several drawdowns. I was in a drawdown in Islamabad twice, Bahrain once, Saudi Arabia once, Kuwait once. Just because there's a drawdown doesn't mean that something terrible is inevitable. It means that just in case things spin out of control, at least the women and children are gone.
Out of an abundance of caution.
Out of an abundance of caution. In fact, when we had our last drawdown in Bahrain, literally nobody elected to leave. Even my scaredy cat wife at the time decided not to leave. And she was afraid of her shadow in the Middle East. So on the one hand, this looks serious. On the other hand, it's Donald Trump. And you know how he is. He's switching sides every day. He's switching positions every single day. The Iranians, I think, are tired of playing this game. And so also out of an abundance of caution, if the Iranians are subject to an attack, whether it comes from the United States or the Israelis, they want us to know that they're not just going to sit this one out this time, that they're going to strike back. And I think that's what everybody's waiting for.
So, I mean, we've heard the Iranians. I mean, the Iranians do have a history of, making incredibly poetic, kind of threats, but then, they don't really deliver. And to their credit, really, is North Korea. It sort of reminds me of North Korea's rhetoric. Is this going to be like sort of more of the same? I mean, I guess let's play this out one step at a time. Let's say, first of all, why would the U.S. attack Iran and not Israel as a proxy? Question one. Question two: if the U.S. attacks, would it be a pinpoint strike or would it really be a massive strike? I have to admit I can't believe that. And then the third question was, if they did that, would the Iranians be in a position to launch a retaliatory attack against U.S. or allied or Israeli assets in the region? And then would it? So there's so many, how do these dominoes fall?
You're right. This is a tough one to call. And I'll tell you, the Iranians don't necessarily play by the same rules that everybody else plays by. The Iranians see the U.S. and Israel as existential threats. And so in the event that there's an American attack, a pinprick attack on a military base, an air base, a nuclear site, whatever it happens to be, the Iranians aren't necessarily going to retaliate by striking an American base or by striking Israel proper. They could retaliate by taking out, a group of oil workers in an oil field somewhere, or hitting an Israeli consulate someplace, or someplace where we would least expect it.
Yeah.
One other thing that the Iranians are very serious about, and I learned this in my time at the agency, is this eye for an eye concept. If the Iranians have people killed in a strike, let's say we hit an Iranian airbase, we kill 10 people. Ayatollah Khamenei will order that 10 Americans be killed in response. Not 9, not 11, 10. And they'll set out to do exactly that.
So interesting. So is that theological?
I think it is theological. We've noted it several times over the years, that they're very, very serious about the eye for an eye concept. I also find it interesting,
that's
Ted.
hard to pull off, right? I mean,
oh, this is a great question from Nick. What's the biggest tell that something is about to go down, for example, in the coming days? That is a great question, and the answer is naval movements. Naval movements. We have long-distance bombers that can fly from, Wyoming to the Persian Gulf, refuel in midair, and fly back, and you'd never know that anything was afoot. But if we start moving aircraft carrier battle groups, that's the tell right there. That's how the Iraqis, for example, knew that we were serious in the first Gulf War. Because it was American policy before 1991 to not send an aircraft carrier into the Persian Gulf. The conventional wisdom was that the Gulf was too shallow and it was too difficult to turn around. It was just too narrow to turn around.
Right.
Well, by February of 1991, we had 6 carrier battle groups in the Persian Gulf at the same time. And so right now we have one in the Red Sea. We have one in the Mediterranean, and we have one in the Arabian Sea. We don't have any in the Gulf yet. But if things turn to shit, look for us to start sending additional naval assets to the Arabian Sea, just below Iran, and into the Gulf itself.
So especially if you need ground troops of any kind, but for medium and short range missile attacks and for example, I remember in the early days of the U.S. invasion of Afghanistan in 2001, right? They moved carrier groups into the Indian Ocean to fire at Afghanistan and so on. And I guess it's sort of like, the Falklands War, right? I mean, it took forever.
Remember that?
It
took weeks. It took weeks. The British declare war on Argentina, and it takes like 3 weeks to get the British Navy all the way down there. And I remember people just sitting kind of playing tiddlywinks, waiting for the Navy to finally show up so we can get this war started.
It's I guess it's like the Middle Ages, right? It's like where the spies go forward, the runners go forward, and they're like, oh, this army's coming this way. They'll be here in a couple of days. It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, ships be slow, ships be big, and yeah, that's how it is. Yeah.
Nick has another question too. Thank you for highlighting it, Ted. How much notice do civilian airlines get to be cleared from hot zones? That's a great question. They don't. We used to send out something called a terror line notice or terror line notification, where let's say you have an intelligence report. You say from Officer Kiriakou, station Jerusalem, to the White House. My secret source tells me that this is going to happen. And then you have XXXXXXXX all across the line. That's the terror line. And below it, you just say, the U.S. government has information that hostilities may begin in the coming days in the Middle East. So you don't expose any sources and methods that way. But they literally tear it along that line. That's why it's called a terror line. And they send that to the civilian airlines. And so they can make a decision to stop flying into Ben Gurion, stop flying into Dubai, stop flying into Doha, just in case things get bad. They at least have a little bit of notification. Good questions. Thank you.
John, while you were answering that question, I looked up the most recent polls to see about U.S. voter attitudes towards an attack on Iran. And they're consistently very low. The American people haven't been primed to attack Iran. I think Iran's not a country that even the most conservative war hawks in this country as voters, or even members of Congress, have been thinking much about lately. And so it would be really hard for this president, who's so poll driven, I think, to be able to pull this off. I mean, imagine he had, with only 19 to 20% of American voters supporting any kind of military attack on Iran, I say he looks at those numbers and he says no.
I have to agree with you.
I think this is
I have to agree with you. There's been no preparation from the White House. There's been no nationally televised speech. There's been no, what's the Latin term? Casus belli.
Casus belli, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. There's been nothing like that.
And there's no propaganda push on right-wing media. No.
So I think you're right, Ted. I think this is a bluff.
I mean, it's not the first. Bluffing is Trump's thing. If I were playing poker, I'd always assume he was bluffing. He'd catch me by surprise if he ever held a good hand. So yeah, I think that's so. But if anything goes down, I mean, first of all, I say, the French say "cherchez la femme." I'm like, cherchez Bibi, right? I mean, it's Netanyahu who's going to do this for domestic political consumption. It would make him so popular in Israel. They would love that.
That is right.
Let the guy who's going to benefit to do it. Let him do it. He'd love to do it.
Won't the deep state start a war anyway without Trump? Eric asks. It's possible.
It's possible.
That they could be the ones that create the casus belli. Yeah. Who knows?
There needs to be an inciting incident, right? Like in a screenplay.
Right. Look at the Gulf of Tonkin. Which actually never happened. Yeah. And by the way, that's widely accepted. People who are not that familiar with the history, look it up. Democratic, Republican, liberal, conservative historians, everyone now widely accepts that it just didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Which is pretty crazy. Well, I guess, but it is terrifying. That's the common thread in both of these stories today, is that we're talking about things that, people are just playing fast and loose with things that they should be a little more sensitive to. John, let's talk a little bit, and I'm wondering if that plays into some of the causes for our next and last topic here, which is a record number of Americans is saying, fuck this, I'm out. So over 1 million Americans, more than usual, left the United States between 2021 and 2024 during the Biden years. We can discuss, and we should discuss here, why that might be. There's what's really super interesting is a lot of upper middle class and a lot of millionaires and billionaires are leaving the United States. Some of them are citing lower quality of life. Some of them are saying that they're afraid of the policy changes or rising authoritarianism on the part of liberals scared of Trump. But obviously this happened under Biden too. It's also the aftermath of the pandemic and how much of the country never really recovered. Point is, if America's a stock, it's not necessarily a hold or a buy at this point. Yeah, that's kind of true, isn't it? I always used to laugh at these reports because I never knew anybody that actually left until recently. And I actually do know a guy who left for Canada. And I thought, he'll be back. He'll be back in a couple of months. And no, he has a job. He's applied for citizenship. He met some guy that he's dating now. And he says he's Canadian. He's Canadian now. I'm like, okay.
Like you, John, I never have known anybody who threatened to do this. I mean, it's like basically we were like a nation of Alec Baldwins. I will leave. I will be here every single time. And it's like, oh, please, Alec, you can go. It's fine. But, there's 4.4 million Americans living overseas, which is, by the way, kind of a hassle to live overseas because you have to pay taxes both to the country where you live and
you do.
And to Uncle Sam. But that nevertheless went up to 5.4 million between 2020 and 2024. And 53% of millionaires and middle-class families now say that due to political and cultural and economic instability and political policy, those are the reasons that are driving their departure. It's not just like, I'd love to live in the south of France and eat great food and drink great wine and watch pretty girls walk by on the street. It's like it's not quality. I mean, it's the politics.
It is the politics, but you know what, Ted? Like you, I'm a dual national. You're a both American and French. I'm both American and Greek. I've got my Greek passport. I have my Greek tax ID number, which is actually as big a deal as having the passport. If I wanted to move to Greece, I could go tomorrow. I love Greece as much as I love the United States. With that said,
here you are.
Yeah, I can't imagine waking up the day after an election and saying, my team lost in the election yesterday. Now we have 4 years of communism, or wait, which is what the last government was, or waking up and saying, my guys won the election yesterday. Too bad that the Nazi Party won 14 seats. How is that better than what we have in the United States? I'm all for left of center pro democracy, European centrist governments. I really am.
Mm-hmm.
But the extreme fringes always have a voice, and I think that's not necessarily a good thing. For example, I'm a practicing Greek Orthodox, and I love that the country is officially Greek Orthodox. I love it. That does not mean that I want the church involved in politics. I don't want the church involved in politics. But the church is the largest landowner in the entire country. It's like a multi-billion-dollar corporation. It's deeply involved in politics, and it is ridiculously right-wing, to the point where it holds the culture back. I don't want the church involved. Similarly, you can, on one day blow up a Citibank branch, say you did it for political reasons, in which case you can't be prosecuted because it was an act of political,
expression.
Thank you. And then the next day you get elected to parliament. It's like you're an admitted terrorist. You just got elected to parliament.
It's not boring.
It's not boring, but I just can't do it.
That's so funny.
It's too much. I do fly back to vote. I'm proud to say. I voted my grandfather's middle school in our ancestral village, which I get a thrill out of every single time I do it. But the politics are just too extreme.
Yeah, I don't rule out moving to France someday. I love the quality of life. It certainly doesn't have the kind of political instability that you're talking about.
Yeah.
The biggest problem politically there is that every election, there's a bunch of new parties you've never heard of.
Yeah, every time.
It's like, oh, did you vote for the QYZ party? Like the who? And it's complicated.
Ted, the last time I voted in Greece, there were 6 communist parties and 2 Nazi parties. It's like, what's that?
No Nazi parties in France because that's illegal. But there are about 6 communist parties in France as well. The thing is, you brought up the holding back thing, and I think subconsciously that's a big thing for me too. It's just like, European countries don't feel dynamic in this sort of subtle, intangible way. It's hard to explain, but you're, especially in Greece, much more so than in France. There you are. You kind of like walk by the Acropolis, and you're like thinking, oh, what do I matter? Even in France, you walk by. If you live in a normal generic town, your church is still 300 years old. And what do I matter? I'm not going to make any difference. This thing was here before I was born. It'll be here long after I'm dead. There's the illusion in the U.S., which is, even though we're celebrating our 250th anniversary next year, that, we're a young country. It feels young, younger anyway. But I still reserve the right to move to France and drink rosé and eat great food before I die. I just, I do think that, I don't know. What does it say? I'm not the kind of person who scares easily. I'm not going to leave because I'll leave if there's a direct threat against Ted Rall. then okay, I'm out. But otherwise, if the government's just sort of doing stupid, dumb things, which it always does, then, what? I guess it's like, I do find it concerning that people who are obviously pretty well educated and successful are scared of staying here, even though they're U.S. citizens. And it's a little disconcerting that foreigners don't want to come as tourists, and with good reason, I think, because they're worried about being harassed at the airport or whatever.
Yeah, right. Sometimes you just can't take it anymore. It's as simple as that. So real quickly, do you think we're headed to hostilities somewhere?
It's funny. I think it's likelier than not, right? I don't think Trump, we've discussed this before. I don't think Trump likes war. I think he likes to build buildings. I don't think he likes to blow them up.
I agree.
It's not his thing. I think it's just sort of temperamentally, he really prefers peace and calm, but his personality and the way he governs it makes it like in a Greek tragedy, likely that he's going to get the exact opposite of what he wants. He's just not wired to preside over like steady as she goes, ship of state. Like, don't worry about it. Just keep going. Don't make waves. I mean, his method of negotiating, we saw this with the Chinese tariffs. It may be coming in for a soft landing, but like, he nearly crashed the global economy like 2 or 3 times in the last month just to negotiate. And like, I guess he's going to argue, and his supporters could say credibly, well, he got the Chinese to the negotiating table in a way that none of his predecessors ever did. That's true. But I mean, it doesn't, it comes at a cost to our reputation as being reliable and steady, and maybe that doesn't matter. I honestly don't know, but I do think hostilities are certainly in the mix when when you have these kind of policies.
Vladimir Putin said a year or two after Joe Biden became president, when asked if he preferred dealing with Trump or dealing with Biden, and he said that he agreed with Trump on much, much more than he agreed with Biden. But he said Biden was at least predictable, and with Trump, you never have any idea what he's going to do. And I'm wondering if Trump has been just lucky so far in that he's been able to bluff and bluster, and everybody so far has responded to that. But then what happens if the Chinese call the bluff or the North Koreans call the bluff? Then we have to either put up or shut up. And if we put up, that could be disastrous. I don't know. I don't know what
I'm really worried. I'm most worried in that scenario of about the Chinese. I mean, I think we would defeat the North Koreans. I mean, but with the Chinese, it's like, I mean, I think of that very that iconic exchange between him, Vance, and Zelensky in the Oval, and when he said, well, you don't, to Zelensky, you don't hold the cards. Well, usually, right now, in most matters, the United States and Donald Trump specifically holds, a royal flush, spades high, right? I mean, no question. The U.S. has the biggest military, the biggest military force. Well, not the biggest, but the most powerful military in the world. It has, the second biggest nuclear arsenal, arguably the most lethal. Economically, it has incredible power, as the world's reserve currency, and so on. So when you want to if your tactic is, I'm the big swinging dick, you'll do what I say or else, that's usually going to work. I mean, he is the 250-pound gorilla. He just is. But China is too. And
yes, exactly.
That's And then sometimes there's a smaller animal like Iran that maybe at a certain point is going to get tired of being beaten up and fight back. That's what worries me.
That's what worries me too. Yeah, that's what worries me too. And the Iranians have so much less to lose this time around because they have the support of the Chinese, the support of the Russians. They've got great trade relations with India and burgeoning trade relations with Pakistan, and they trade with the UK and the French and the Germans, the Japanese. They don't need us. They don't need us at all. It would be nice for them if there were no American sanctions, but we're the ones losing out right now, not the Iranians.
I think I know it's like off topic, but I'm going to just say we should talk about the two musical deads this week. Sly of the Family Stone, and of course Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys today just died. That's very. I mean, it's funny. I never really started to appreciate the Beach Boys in a meaningful way until I was older. I always thought that they were silly, and I know they were really music people. And I used to be a record critic at the New York Observer, So I love music. I have thousands and thousands of records and CDs, and I live and breathe music. Music's always on here. So it's like I couldn't believe I came to him so late. And by the way, I would just want to say the biopic that about his life and how he was abused by his Svengali psychologist manager, and how he was saved really by his second wife. That's like heartbreaking. I mean, I cried like crazy. Just
really taken advantage of.
He was such a genius, though. And Sly from the Family Stone also. Holy cow!
Sly Stone, man. I felt so bad when I saw that Sly Stone had died. And it wasn't just funk. I mean, he's sort of known as the father of funk, but it went deeper than funk. He was a brilliant musician, brilliant arranger. And then, he had kind of a weird life. He's another guy who was taken advantage of by his manager and was broke for a while and living in a motorhome.
But he didn't care.
In Sonoma, but he didn't care. You're right. He didn't care.
That's the best part. It
was all about the music.
It's like one time I was on the subway in the 80s in New York, and two guys pulled knives on me, and I just had this epiphany. I started babbling in nonsense French to them, and they gave up. And I remember I went home and met my roommates, and I said, no one can really oppress you unless you cooperate. You have to cooperate. If you don't cooperate, so Sly, he didn't cooperate. He he was like, oh, you can take all my money. I don't care. I'm cool.
He doesn't care.
I've got my trailer.
I only got mugged once in my life. I was a junior in college, and it was the last beautiful night before, winter hit. And nobody on my floor wanted to go for a walk with me. So I went by myself, and it was about 10 or 10:30 at night. And I went straight down 21st Street from George Washington University to Constitution Avenue. And when I got to Constitution, there's nobody around. When I got to Constitution, this guy, he's holding a long, what looked like a cardboard tube, like a mailing tube. He said to me, "You have the time?" And as soon as he said it, I was like, oh no. And I said, yeah, it's like 10:30. And he puts up the tube like that, like he's going to hit me like with a baseball bat.
Yeah.
And he goes, "Give me your wallet." And in a split second, I said to myself, I bet that tube's empty and I can take this guy. And I just slugged him right in the face. Right in the face. There was a loud cracking sound. He kind of stumbled back. Ooh. He looked at me and then he ran away.
John, we both have a mugging story that involves got the time. So I was mugged 3 times in a row in about a month.
Oh no!
Right around the Bernard Goetz bad days in like 1983, 1984. So I was home in Ohio, and so I'd had enough, and I decided to like roll, to roll Charles Bronson style. So I bought a pistol, and I flew back home to New York. So I FedExed the pistol.
Oh, you FedExed it, yeah.
Back then, and I put stickers on it that said contains magnetic discs, do not X-ray. So the pistol and a box of bullets came to me, and the very first day I decided to carry it. I had it under my jacket, waiting for the subway, and this guy comes up to me, same exact thing. He goes, "Hey man, you got the time?" and I said, you know, it was probably 9:45 because I was due at work at 10. And he had a knife. He pulled out a switchblade. And he goes, "What else you got?" And I said, "I got this, asshole," and pulled the gun on him. And he just, when the blood drained out, he turned around and ran. And then I turned around and I noticed the token booth clerk picking up the phone, obviously to call the police. And I was like, "Oh man!" So I ran home, put the gun locked it up into a trunk, locked it in, and never carried it again. Months later, a burglar broke into my apartment and then stole a bunch of my crap and broke into my trunk and stole the gun.
Oh my God.
And I for years was scared that it would be used in some kind of, I bought it under my name in Ohio. I was afraid that it would be used in a crime. And, for obviously nothing happened, but it was, or if it did, nobody ever got, it never came back. But, there was like no more guns for Ted. It was just like this ridiculous, but I did like the fact that as a cartoonist, I immediately knew what the balloon needed to be over my head when he said, "What else you got?"
Oh man. Oh my God. Not good at all.
No.
Can't wait to get a pardon. My first purchase is probably multiple firearms.
Yeah, probably. Well, yeah. They're legal to have now in New York, right? Ever since the Supreme Court decision. For years, I had a carry permit because I
Virginia
had threats.
We had a Second Amendment issue that went to the Supreme Court here in Virginia. We had a law that you could buy as many guns as you want, quite literally. And then there was a governor who tried to push a law through the state legislature limiting you to one gun per day. And people went just completely bananas saying, one gun a day. If I want to buy 1 million guns a day, it's mine. Exactly. And so the Supreme Court overturned the law. And so there's no limit on the number of guns you can buy in Virginia. None.
No, maybe it's not an unreasonable law. It's just unconstitutional.
That's right.
Very quickly here. So what do you make of this before we call it a show? The U.S. has ordered all embassies in striking distance of Iran to convene emergency action committees and send cables back to D.C. Is that a big deal?
Yeah. No. That is exactly what has to happen when the State Department begins to order voluntary drawdowns or drawdowns of dependents. So what the Emergency Action Committee is the ambassador, the deputy chief of mission, and the heads of all the sections. In a little embassy like Bahrain, even though I was kind of a junior officer, I was the head of the economic section. So I was part of the emergency committee. So what they do is the ambassador says, okay, we've got this kerfuffle with the Iranians. Let's say things turn to shit. What do you think we should do? And everybody throws out an idea. Usually the political officer is the one who writes them all down. And then he writes a cable saying, the Emergency Action Committee met. This is what we decided. We're offering voluntary drawdown of dependents. Everybody else is safe. Morale is high. We have our emergency walkie-talkies are all charged and awaiting further instructions. So I would have expected this within a couple of hours of a drawdown announcement from the State Department. Okay.
All right. I guess we'll leave it there. Brian Wilson and Sly Stone. See you on the other side.
R.I.P.
Indeed. Please subscribe, follow, like, and share the show. That's you know why. I don't have to explain why, but please do it. It's much appreciated. We will be back on Saturday at 12 noon Eastern time, unless we change our minds, but looks like that's what it's going to be. That could happen. Thanks so much. I'm Ted Rall. That's John Kiriakou. And
hi, everybody.
We're out of here.